Welcome in. It's the calm before the storm, big Saturday, rivalry Saturday, neutral court Saturday, but we still have Friday college basketball to hopefully not lose the farm on. Last night was brutal for me. I got reverse swept. It was ugly. It was just a card of tales of two halves. Over in the first half, under full game, dog in the first half, collapses full game. It's college basketball, nothing I can do. I can just bet the games and live with the results. So let's talk about today's card. Not too exciting of a card, but there are games, so a degenerate like myself will be betting them. For the first game, Xavier and Georgetown, I do have to take note of the fact that Xavier has been very good scoring wise on the road early in games. So seeing a team total under 40 is definitely something that sparked my interest. I think that with Xavier, we have seen some of their better players, specifically Zach Fremantle, Jack Nungy, and Colby Jones, have much better point outputs on the road than at home, which is obviously surprising. I think that those three guys are going to be critical tonight. You know that Georgetown does have some offensive firepower at the guard spot with guys like Jay Heath, Brandon Murray, and of course, Primo Spears. I think that the best guys to me are probably Brandon Murray and Primo Spears point-wise for Georgetown. We've seen Primo Spears in second halves of games. He really takes the offense upon himself, trying to get to the rim and the free throw line, regardless of his free throw shooting. And with Brandon Murray, he's just cold-blooded. He does not care about his percentages. He's just going to put shots up when he thinks that he can make those shots, and that's all the time. So we get 21-plus field goal attempts out of him tonight. I think that he's going over his point total. And with Primo Spears, it's a high one, but I do think it's one that he can get over at 15 and a half. So scoring-wise, I'm interested in some of the big boys for Xavier because if you can't score down low versus Georgetown, you can't get guys like Wahab into trouble, expose Ryan Mutombo's defensive prowess, then you're in big trouble also, and you're not going to be covering as an 11-point favorite. I will say this, with the line start opening up at 158 and already down to 153 and a half, it is one of those 150 rule games, conference game, total in the 150s, moves down by 1 point, you take the under. It's a 60% system that's worked for a long time. I think that would have been the way to approach it on opener, but right now, I'm inclined to look at the over and try and middle just because in this matchup, Xavier and Georgetown have had a lot of games in the 140s, in the high 140s. Not a lot of home games at Georgetown that have gone into the 150s, so there is that to consider. But I'm a middle guy, and I can lie bet if I don't like what I see early on. I think that the highest value is definitely with the points with both teams' best players. And looking at Colby Jones specifically, his splits on the road are 7 points higher than at home. So 14 and a half points with him seems like a very generous prop. So I like props in that game. And I did like the under when it came out, but now I'm looking to middle it. All right, Dartmouth and South Florida. South Florida's going to be getting Corey Walker and Keyshawn Bryant back tonight. And this South Florida team has really turned it around since I've been harping on them and they lost to Southeast Missouri State. They were playing some pretty bad basketball at home. I think that with South Florida, it's very important to note that this team is scoring the basketball at a much higher rate. This is a team for the last couple years that we've really been able to pound unders with. Hold on. Fucking scammers from India. South Florida has really been able to step up their offensive production. I think that in 4 out of the last 5 games, they've scored 72 points or more. And when you look at some of their totals, all their totals have been in this similar range, 128 to 133. And we're seeing these over-under margins being beaten by 5 or more points in the last 5 games. So I like the full game over. I got 130.5 on South Florida. I do think that there is some value in a couple different areas. I think that with Dartmouth's team total in the first half at 26.5, it's something that they've been regularly able to eclipse all year long. So even though it doesn't correlate with South Florida winning and dominating, I still think that this is a first half team total number that they can get over. When I look at South Florida, I think that they can score 75 points in this game. So in a low 70 team total, I do think that that's something that they can do. And the last 2 games that they've been double-digit favorites at home, we've seen them beat Charleston Southern and we've seen them beat St. Francis, New York by 15 and 20 points. So in theory, that is something that South Florida has shown that they can cover an 11-point spread. The big question is going to be for Dartmouth, is Ryan Cornish playing or not? I'm going to go under the assumption that he isn't. And if that changes before a game, then I will adjust because he is really the big difference maker for that team. Handles the ball, handles the point, runs the offense. And we've seen that even though it's a little more turnover prone without him, they're still a much better team and a much better double-digit dog on the road with Cornish in the lineup. So right now, looking at South Florida. All right, let's jump over to the added board, talk about Bethune-Cookman and Incarnate Word. Now, my thing with Incarnate Word is this is going to be their first game at home versus a D1 opponent. And you know what? I think that they definitely have that bad taste in their mouth. They know what this team did last time they came into their building about 3 years ago and lost by 25. I don't think that's going to be this case today, just because I haven't liked what I've been seeing with Joe French and Marcus Garrett, and those are the 2 lead scorers for this team. Now, Joe French has been inconsistent as fuck. He's only averaging 8.5 points over his last 9, and only 4 of those games he went into double digits. So if you can't give me 15, 16 points from your best player, I don't see them going on the road and being able to dominate Incarnate Word, which on paper they look like they should. But I'm not gonna give Bethune-Cookman the benefit of the doubt when they haven't shown me that they should deserve it. Now, Marcus Garrett, on the other hand, he's the guy that has been a little more consistent, but I got to see better three-point shooting out of him, better free throw attempts out of him, because this is a guy that can break you off the dribble and get to the rim when he wants to. But if you're going to allow him and give him space, allow him to settle for those jump shots, he's going to miss more than he's going to make. So I go back to the Northwestern State game. They didn't play tight defense on him after watching what Idaho State defense did. And there you go. He doesn't even shoot 35% in either game. So on paper, I can understand Bethune-Cookman having the value. The line's flipped. It's only a 1.5 point spread. It's a coin flip game. You can make a good case for them. I just think that Incarnate Word's defense is going to be at the forefront here. We've seen them on neutral courts, on the road, just be able to stop teams from doing what they want and really cutting down the possessions on the game. Now, coming off a huge blowout loss to Kansas State was something that I expected. I do not think that we're going to see that type of offense again. I think that we are going to see a total that is low. I think that it does stay under this 134.5 mark. And I have lots of backup for that. When we look at their game against Grambling, Dartmouth, Valparaiso, what's the common theme in all these games? Even the Grambling game that they lost badly in, the total over-under margin was more than 6 points. So listen, like if you're ballsy and you're up big right now, taking this incarnate word Bethune-Cookman additional total on the under would be ballsy. I'm not there yet, but I could see myself getting on that under 131.5 at like plus 130. And that's a good add-on to the full game under that I already have. As far as the side, I'm a little biased. I like Incarnate Word, but they really haven't given me a lot of reason to take them to win an actual basketball game. And let's be frank, going and beating Grambling and then getting beat by them in their building the way that they did not inspire a lot of confidence. So coin flip game, I like the totals a little more. Bethune-Cookman's first half team total under 31.5 points. Definitely something that I may jump on before the game starts. All right. Let's move it on. Let's talk about, no one cares. Let's talk about Delaware Princeton. Yeah, okay. So with Delaware is obviously playing some pretty good basketball right now. So it is important to recognize that this is a team that is on the freaking mend. Obviously, when you look at some of their previous games, especially the game against Cornell, gives you a lot of reason to I don't really know. I don't like this. But I just think that this Delaware team at this number is going to have some value tonight. I think that when you look at the matchup that they really need to exploit is obviously Jameer Nelson. With his 20 points per game that he's averaging, he's really assumed ownership of this offense. But I look at Ebi Asamoah and Jair Davis as guys that got to be able to provide that complementary scoring. I have a lot of faith in what Christian Ray can do on the glass, scoring those second chance opportunities. And against a team like Princeton, you're going to have to be in the passing lanes. You're going to have to really make it a little more difficult for them to run their offense if you're going to want to have success. Otherwise, they're going to make 4 or 5 passes. They're going to end up with an open jump shot, or you're going to freaking bring that help defense and someone's going to back cut right to the rim. This is a Princeton offense that you're going to see a lot of back cuts on. So I think that going up against Iona, blowing that lead, I don't think that they can bring that same quality of play tonight. I think that they definitely have value to win the game. I just don't like them as a more than 2 3-point make favorite. So I'll roll with that. I got Delaware at +8, so I'm pretty happy about that. And outside of Ryan Landberg and fucking Tosan, I just don't really know where else you're getting consistent scoring. I've watched this Princeton team a bunch. I like how they shoot their free throws. I like how unselfish they are with the basketball. But if you're not getting some double-digit production from Kelman and Alico, I just don't see them being able to outscore in an over-type fashion Delaware. They'll have to really grind it out to beat them in a game that I would think that can see that probably does not see 143, 144 points. So if the under is anywhere underneath that, I would be interested in that. I haven't bet it. I only have Delaware in this game, but it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Not my favorite on the card, obviously. Wisconsin, Green Bay, and Stanford. Now, this is an interesting game because Wisconsin, Green Bay has been really good when it comes to going over in this point range. And we did see the line dip all the way to 128.5 this afternoon. Now it's back up to 130. I think that Stanford really has to come out and hit 3-point shots early in the game. We've seen them time and time again really play down to their opponent. And it starts with freaking Harrison Ingram. Obviously you like what you're getting down low from Maxime Renault. You like what you're getting from O'Connell and Jones on the wings, but you got to avoid foul trouble. You got to score from the 3-point line early, and you got to really take away some of Green Bay's 3-point shooting from Zach Blake and Clarence Cummings III. Those are 2 guys that if you let get off, then you're going to be battling all game against this Green Bay team. They are not high quality, but if you play down to their level, then any college basketball team has a chance. The last time that they played was obviously doesn't matter. It's a long time ago, but it was a close game, but Green Bay was better. at that time. Now, from an over-under perspective, it's hard for me to look at the under in this game just because when I go through some of the game logs and I look at some of these road games outside of the Loyola Illinois game, we've seen the University of Green Bay go, I guess, like maybe 6 to 10 points over their closing line total. And that screams to me additional plus money. Let's jump on it. 130, take the 134. In the Kansas City game, the line was 126. They scored 134 points. I think that's a manageable number if you want to jump on the additional totals. Their last 3 games were on the road were against what? St. Thomas, Utah Valley on a neutral court, and Queens College on a neutral court. All 3 of those games went over and hit at least 134. So for me, if I have to eat crow in this game, I have no problem doing so. I think that it's a good value play jumping on it. And when you look at Green Bay, I want to see what Stanford's first half team total is, because I think that at home, Stanford has really elevated their scoring. We could even go back as far as the Pacific game to talk about that at the beginning of the season. I think Stanford, especially at 37 or 37 and a half, has value as a first half team total. If we're going to get the elevated scoring that I anticipate, then Green Bay is probably going to be having to keep up with Stanford, and Stanford will obviously have that 3-point shooting that I'm praying for. Outside of that, I'm not looking to do anything on the spread. 52.5 points full game for Green Bay is very tempting, but if you go back and look at some of their road performances, you're just not really seeing the high probability of that one. So against freaking Wisconsin, they scored 45. Against fucking Utah Valley, they only got to 56. So 52.5 definitely seems like something that I can get on. I'm just not there yet. I'm not there yet. So, all right. What is another game that I wanted to talk about? Oh yeah, Missouri State and Oral Roberts. Now, listen, Oral Roberts had a fucking beautiful performance, but let's not forget they were down 3 points at halftime versus Liberty. Against Missouri State is one of the best under teams in basketball, and they're going to have to freaking score the basketball at Oral Roberts' pace if they want to keep up. We've seen this is probably a yearly series, and Missouri State won by 9 points last year, but this is a different Missouri State team without without Sharp, without Black, without freaking Mosley, so without Prim. Like, there's so many awesome players that were on Missouri State last year that aren't there this year. So I think that Oral Roberts really has this line and game set up for themselves. If they can't win this game by 10 points, getting some dominant performance from Max Asmus and getting some good production and lots of minutes out of Connor Vanover, then, punch me in the dick. So that's how I got to say. I think that this Oral Roberts team is definitely better at home. I like to back them at home more so on the road. It's all about pace and tempo in this game. It's all about pace and tempo. Now, for Missouri State, we've seen Chance Moore, Brian Trimble, Kendall Moore really be able to have good games, but not have good games together. And you need those 3 guys putting it all together in the same game to beat a team like Oral Roberts, because one thing that's been a knock on Oral Roberts outside of the years that Kevin O'Banger was there, Max Asmus hasn't really had that supporting staff. But this year with Isaac McBride and Carlos Jurgens and Keon Thompson, they are there. You got multiple double-digit scores that can freaking help take the freaking pressure off you defensively. So if Asmus wants to keep on climbing that career point total list, I think we're going to see it happen tonight. Obviously, this is going to be an intense game because of the geographical freaking rivalry. But I think that it's Oral Roberts' game to freaking dominate and force their scoring tempo. If they do so, then they're covering those 8 points and we're seeing this game go over. But when you look at Missouri State, you probably want to have a little money on that additional under, maybe a half unit on a plus 140 or plus 150, because it's hard to look at the game logs and say, well, fuck, this team's going to fucking go over because their opponent is. We know it's easier to slow a team down than it is to speed one up. I just think that when you make jump shots early, if you're Oral Roberts, you put the pressure on Missouri State to play outside of their comfort zone and really have to put up more volume shot attempts. So I look forward to watching that game. Definitely one that will be on my big screen. All right. Let's talk about the other 7 o'clock games on the added board. Listen, I'm going to be really brief with this one. I'm on St. Bonaventure. They're my team. I'm betting on them. I don't fucking care what the numbers are. I don't care about freaking Pat Chambers being a man whore and there not being a woman on this planet that he would not go to bed with. That's just not me. I'm just not betting on Dunk City. I think that when you look at the matchup, personnel-wise, I think that St. Bonaventure has to do a good job with their wing freshmen. And I'm talking about Barry Evans. I'm talking about Farrell. These are long, athletic dudes that have to be able to stand in foul trouble, be able to cut off those driving lanes, and just close out on three-point shooters. I think that with Florida Gulf Coast, they have been definitely prone to playing low scoring, low possession games, but this is not a roster that is missing talent and scoring. When you look at Chase Johnson coming off the bench and his 3-point shooting, when you look at Zach Anderson, the work that he can do around the rim, this is no easy task for my Bonnies. We're going to need good, clean offense. We're going to need Chad Venning to be able to score down low like we've seen him do already this season. Kyrell Luke to take advantage of a lackadaisical defense and go coast to coast and score near the rim. Daryl Banks has to come off those screens, hit those mid-range jimmies, and have his goddamn feet set, waiting for a 3-point shot attempt, because when his feet are set, he is very hard to take off his game. I think that this is a great matchup. I just wish that the line was 2.5 or 3. At 3.5 or 4, it's not my favorite line, but I'm a Bonnie guy, so I'm willing to donate some money if I have to. I think that when you look at Demir Bishop and Caleb Cato for Florida Gulf Coast, those are the guys that you can't forget about, and you're not going to have any kind of weakness when it comes to underclassmen, because you're going to be having your point guard position ran by Isaiah Thompson. So I think that this Florida Gulf Coast team is a good challenge for my Bonnies, but there definitely is a game script for them to win. And I just think that this is the game that if it was on a neutral court, if it was at Dunk City, then I look at it differently. But I think that when you watch that FAU game against Florida Gulf Coast and them losing by 30, not being able to stop any dribble drive penetration, that's something that the Bonnies can do to them tonight. So I'm rolling with my Bonnies. I'm going to have my Bonnies in a couple parlays. And that's about it. So, yeah, we'll move on from there. All right, Central Connecticut State and Manhattan. Now, this is a game where I think that Manhattan definitely has to bring their best, similar to what we saw them bring against Bryant. That was a out-of-this-world offensive freaking display, and that was by Manhattan. And I don't rarely see or say this about Manhattan, but their scoring is up right now. The last 3 games, even though the Bryant game went to overtime, they've scored 59 or more points. So I think that this is a group that definitely can get into a higher scoring game, but they got to do something on the glass. The way that they're getting beat on the glass is the reason why they're on a 3-game losing streak. If they had dominated on the glass versus Monmouth and against Bryant, they probably win those basketball games. But now we're talking about Manhattan as a 5-point favorite versus Central Connecticut State that is getting very good production and individual ISO scoring from Kellen Amos. I just don't think that is that great of a matchup for them. I don't think that they're very excited and hyped to play this game. And I think that it's going to come and show itself when it comes to the spread. Now, Manhattan obviously had a lot of freaking issues when they lost their coach and fired him a week before the season. Then they lost 3 players, including Jose Perez. But it really hasn't stopped them, we didn't expect this Manhattan team to run the MAC. They're not going to, and they haven't been. But they're not a doormat in this league. And I think that when you look at how Samir Stewart is coming off a 35-point game, he probably doesn't do that again tonight. You're going to need guys like freaking Lucas Padgett and Ant Nelson to be able to stay on the floor, stay out of foul trouble, because that hurt them also last time out. So I think that playing disciplined basketball and not having to go for the steal on every half-court offensive possession for Central Connecticut State will help Manhattan. But if you can bring Roberts off the bench and get those freaking second chance opportunities, get that inside scoring, I don't think Central Connecticut State really has anyone to stop Josh Roberts. So if he plays tonight, it's a really big boost to Manhattan. If they don't, I think that it plays into the hands of Central Connecticut State. Now, Central Connecticut State obviously has to get good production from Kellen Amos, but if you can get what you got out of Scantlebury and Rogers scored the first 8 points of the game last time. I think that that's going to be a big freaking boost. What this team has missed is complementary scoring and multiple guys having big games in the same game. So if Central Connecticut State only goes 7-man deep tonight, I'm cool with that as long as those 3 guys I just mentioned are producing. I think that 5 points is a good number with the dog here, and that's what I'm doing. I'm biting on it. I think that there's also value on the over, but with the over, I'm just concerned about what the 3-point shooting is. If Central Connecticut State can hit threes early in this game is going over 135.5. But if they can't hit threes, that's when their games don't go under. That's when their games don't go over. And we have a pretty good game log or freaking history of seeing these games where they don't hit threes, not going over. When I look at the main game, when I look at the Brown game, the game against Holy Cross, 3-point shooting issues in all those games. And what was the common theme with them? Well, they stayed under by 10 plus points in all 3 games. So with this game could go really under or it can go really over. So my suggestion would be take whatever total you think is going to hit and then take the under or over 4 points in addition to it. So I think that this is one of those double stack games. And I like these additional totals because none of the books are proving that they have a good grasp on the totals. So if you're putting out a 134 and that game is going 158, then I'm going to take advantage of that shit. So that's what I'm trying to do tonight. All right. So, not a strong feel right now, not a strong play when it comes to the total. I do like the 135.5 over, but this game could go heavy under, like I just said, because of how inaccurate the books have been about posting these totals. All right, there's a couple games I'm going to talk about, and then I'll get the fuck out of here. Let's talk about Chicago State, Southern Illinois. I got on Chicago State at the opener. I think that with Southern Illinois, we have seen them score better and score higher at home than on the road. I just think in this game, they have to realize that Chicago State is not going to allow them to move the ball from side to side. They're not going to allow them to have this free ball movement that we see Southern Illinois have in their best offensive games. I think that Chicago State, especially with Brent Davis and Weaver and Corbett, all these guys can score from all 3 levels. Chicago State has the talent that we haven't seen them have in a long time. So when I see 14.5 points right now, I still think that's a number that they can get, that they can stay within. I think that really playing a dirty rock fight style game is going to work out to Chicago State's favor. If they have to score and consistently score and avoid those 3 or 4 minute scoring droughts that they have had to go through a bunch of times in games this year, then yeah, I could be fucking wrong. But looking at my numbers said Chicago State is a double-digit dog. And that's not even going off what Murray State did. I will say this, if Chicago State gets out to a first half lead, Southern Illinois live at halftime or on a second half play is something that you got to consider. I think you have to consider some of these big favorites when they're down at halftime, especially at home. We saw it last night. Who do we see? We saw with Wagner. Wagner was a big favorite at home. We saw with Wisconsin. Wisconsin was a big favorite at home. Tales of two halves are happening every fucking other game so far this year. So something definitely to be aware of. All right. Obviously, I'm on a number in Chicago State that's no longer available. I still advocate for the 14.5, and I'm on the under, and at 131.5, I still think that it's doable there. If you're a little sketchy about under 131.5, with it being as high as 134.5 at opener, I would look at the first half under. So not something that I'm on, but something you could look at. All right, Creighton and Marquette. Now, this is a game where I don't have a side or total on. The only thing that I was really attracted to in this game were player props. Obviously, with player props, it was a pretty limited board today, only 2 games and a bunch of different players that were available. But for Marquette has had obviously this Canadian connection of Olivier Maxence Prosper. The French Canadian from Montreal has been fantastic this year. Wish that he was able to do that at Clemson, but happy to be able to profit off it tonight, hopefully. His road and home splits are significantly different. He averages 19 points at home and I think 7 points on the road. So at 14.5 points, knowing that he's going to see the floor for probably 30 minutes and probably get 15 shot attempts seems like a very reasonable freaking prop at 14.5 points, even though it's minus 135 juice. So I like Prosper over his points today. I was looking at Cam Jones, but Cam Jones hasn't really had a really good last 4 games, and his road and home splits don't favor the number that he's at, but he was someone that I was looking at. With Creighton, my big concern with Arthur Kaluma over 13.5 points tonight is that if Ryan Kalkbrenner comes back, a lot of the offense that's rolling through him will go through Kalkbrenner. So that may be a spot that I have to buy off of, but seeing the number on DraftKings at 13.5, I jumped on it right away just because we do see Creighton play slow down. We do see Creighton like to throw it on the low block. And without Kalkbrenner, I don't think that Frederick King is going to get more looks down there than Kaluma. So Kaluma just has to give us 14 points. I think that it's reasonable, especially in a game that's lined in the 150s and could go way over that. Outside of Kaluma, the one guy I liked is sort of a bias pick too, another Canadian, Ryan Nembhard. Now, Nemi's been in a fucking slump, but when he goes out on the road into a hostile environment like he's going to against Marquette in Big East opening play, I like him to score and snap out of it. I think we're getting a big discount on him also, considering that he was at 14.5 or 15.5 points last week or 2 weeks ago. Now we can get him at over 11.5 points, minus 110 tonight. So DraftKings is hooking it up. I'm rolling with another Canadian on my prop list, and I'm cool with it. All right. Outside of that, those are the only guys that I have in the Marquette Creighton game, and I wasn't really considering anybody else. I like betting props, but I don't want to get too heavy into them just because foul trouble, routing a team takes the guy out. So I saw with Colin Castleton, they were beating Ohio by like 30 points. He took Castleton out. He didn't get the shot attempts that he usually does, and he didn't cash my props. So trying to avoid situations like that. And I just wish that I knew how to find, instead of having to go through game logs, to find who the best first half scorers are. Because I'll say this, Drew Timme and Jelly Walker are 2 guys at the top of that list. All right. Weber State and Cal Poly. I'm not going to talk about that game. I have bets on the game. I just don't want to talk about it. It's an ugly game. Weber's played terrible. Cal Poly's been great at home. It's a fucked up game. I'm not going to waste our time talking about it. Southern and Youngstown State. Now, I think that from a situational perspective, Youngstown does have some value just because they're coming off a really brutal home loss that they should have been able to force overtime and they didn't. I think that Youngstown, from a talent perspective, has the better ball handling, the better low post score. The question's going to be, what version of Southern do we see? Are we going to see the version of Southern that played against Xavier most recently and lost by 20 and only scored 59 points? Or are we going to see a better Southern version, more like the version that we saw against freaking, who the fuck were they good against? I guess they were good against Arizona because they didn't get blown up by 30 and they scored 78 points. So I want to see more something like along those lines. For this game today, I think that with Youngstown, it's all about getting off to a good start, keeping Southern off the free throw line and taking away open 3-point looks. If you're giving up 3-point looks that are contested with a hand in the guy's face, I can live with that. But I cannot live with some of this bullshit that we're seeing from Southern, like especially last game. Now, getting off to a good start is going to be something that Youngstown can do, but you got to take away PJ Bird and TJ Lyons and Brian Whitley and, of course, Bryson ATN. There are experienced upperclassmen scorers on this team. So realistically, they should be able to put up a good fight. At the end of the day, though, I think that we're seeing the Southern team get figured out. We're seeing the Southern team succumb to all these road games and extensive schedule. And frankly, it's holiday season. So I want to see Youngstown in a night game, get some people into the building and fuck with their eyes open. Southern has been definitely one of the teams that you want to look at an over-under additional total. They're all over the board. The books just cannot line their totals correctly. The last 2 games that have been lined have gone under by 12 and 19 points. So think about that at 7 or 8 points that your book's going to offer you at plus 200 plus. There's some fucking value when it comes to these additional totals. Now, for Youngstown, when they do not dominate on the glass, that's when they don't cover. That's when they don't win. I think that when you saw them against Western Illinois, go on the road, win on the glass, take as many shots as they needed, get those second chance opportunities, that's when you're going to see them rout. But if you see them play a game like they played against Northern Kentucky, where they're going back and forth, one team's having the lead, one team's giving up the lead, and back and forth, that's not going to work. Youngstown's best as a favorite when they can go wire to wire. If they can go wire to wire tonight, then they're going to take care of that spread. Otherwise, Southern has some value first half, and if Southern can freaking have a much better performance than they did against Xavier, and they're taking a step down in competition, I don't hate their first half team total over. So looking at it at fucking 33 or 33 and a half, that's a number that they can get over. We've regularly see them be able to score that in tons of games so far this year. And over the last 5, they are averaging 35 points in the first half, aside from that game against Xavier. So, I'm all over the place on this. I think that there's value with some team totals. I think Youngstown's team total, if you can get under 80 points, is a good number also. This is a team that regularly scores at that kind of pace and tempo. And when you look at some of their totals, they've been having the same issues. The last 4 games that have been lined last 5 games that have been lined for them have all gone over, 4 of them by 8 or more points. And the only game that they got right was the Western Illinois game because it was a rout. What happens in a rout game? One team may have that elevated scoring and get to that 80-point plateau, but the other one may have trouble getting to 70. So I think that there's definitely over potential if you like it. Full game, I'm not so sure about the first half, but I also think that if you like some team totals in this game, this would be the spot to do it. You're going to get a mad Youngstown team, and with their free throw shooting, it's pretty fucking knockdown like. You're not going to have a lot of guys missing and leaving points at the free throw line for Youngstown, and at 76%, that's the kind of team that I can back in a situation where they're trying to protect a late second half lead and have the game getting extended by fouling. Another thing about Youngstown is be aware they're a very good second half team. So if this game is close at halftime, consider Youngstown on the second half line or a live line in the second half because their scoring goes up, I would say, like 10 to 12 points just from the first half to the second half. That's why another reason why I like the full game team total over. So could be a really offensive game, just like the Lafayette game last night. So lots of points, I would say. All right. Yeah, Jose Perez is definitely getting screwed over, that's for sure. Yeah, I was listening to Coach Huggins talk about it today. He's just dumbfounded. He's like, with all the shit that's going on with all these fucking players, a new president coming in, you would think that they would have some freaking respect for this kid's season and his eligibility. He got screwed over by a coach that was fired by a vindictive AD 7 days before the season started. If you don't have a connection with that coach, how is he going to get you to the next level, getting you paid to play basketball? And Jose Perez is a fucking collegiate talent. We've seen him at Gardner Webb fuck with his eyes open. We saw him at Manhattan fuck with his eyes open. And he's already sat a year because of redshirting. So it's some fucking bogus bullshit right now going on with Jose Perez and him not being able to lace it up for West Virginia. All right. So to recap on Southern and Youngstown, I like Youngstown full game because of the situational rebound spot. I like both teams to score points. And I think that Southern's first half team total has value if you can get under 34. So, all right. Austin P and Murray State. Now, this is a big rivalry game. A lot of fucking animosity between these two programs. And Murray State has really owned the fuck out of them. So I'm not in love with 8.5 points, but I do think that we see some scoring in this game, and the totals definitely reflected that. We saw the total open up at 131. We're seeing it now as high as 135. It's not my favorite total to get on, but I would not be opposed to jumping on a first half line when it comes to this game. Now, when it comes to the first half total at 63, that's a very reasonable freaking number considering the line movement on this game. Now, if you could have got 61.5 on opener, I'm jealous of you. I should have done it, but I'm still liking 63 points in what I would say a high intensity game. Now, Murray State has not been a good favorite. We've seen that over and over again. Obviously, the Chicago State game is fresh in your memory, but I also have the Illinois State game in my memory. So from a win-loss perspective, Murray State has owned Austin P. I think that Austin P's only won 2 out of the last 10 games that they played. And when I look at some of the game logs, the favorite has covered in, I think, 8 out of those 10 games and with a high ATS margin. So this may be a game that if you're bold enough to take Murray State minus 8.5, maybe you take them minus 10.5 also for a little plus money. So I haven't done either, but this is not one of the Murray State teams that I've really fallen in love with. Matt McMahon really had a much better version of this team last year. And from what they lost with KJ Williams and fucking Justice Hill, there's just so many guys that aren't there anymore that really made this team a good bet on team. For me, looking at the game logs, the most challenging thing about betting this game is trying to bet overs with Murray State, but Murray State's best overs are when they're lined in the low 130s, not when they're lined in the mid 140s or the high 140s. Every time we've seen them lined like that, we've seen the number stay under. Chicago State stayed under by 11.5 points. Chattanooga stayed under by 10 points. Tulsa stayed under by 7.5 points, So there definitely is a precedent right there for a Murray State additional total under. But I think that with some of these high intense rivalry games, it's difficult to think that they're going to lock each other down because there is a different level of animosity that we just don't see in a regular out of conference game. Now, Austin P is coming off a really nice win against Tennessee State, but I can't stop myself from thinking about some of the poor performances that I've seen, especially losing to Howard at home. So for me, I definitely think that there is a precedent for Murray State to romp, but I will put that asterisk out there that Murray State has not been able to beat teams by margin. I don't think it's going to be the case tonight. And I would have to look at Austin P. I think that the game that they won by the most points was the game against Tulsa. And Tulsa had a really bad shooting game in the first half in that game. Take that out, and I don't think that there's another game that they won by 9 points. So, not my favorite game, but definitely a game that by 8 o'clock I'll have a bunch of plays on. I'll probably have some additional total under. I'll probably have a first half over. I'll probably have some Murray State somehow, even though it's not a sound bet to make. See, that's why I have to talk this out, because I have to speak out loud, see the fucking nonsense that I'm putting out there, and be like, okay, pump the brakes on that shit, chill out, move to the next game. All right. Luckily, there's only one more game, and that's Mississippi Valley State versus Tulsa. Now, Tulsa is a team that on paper, with a guy like Sam Griffin, you should be able to fall in love with, but I'm not falling in love with this line. I think that seeing the line at 21 or 21 and a half screams to me Mississippi Valley State. Now, Mississippi Valley State is improved over last year's version, but they're still not a good basketball team. And when they're not playing defensive prowess teams like Mississippi State, I do think that they have a little more value as a big dog. The question is going to be, can Tulsa freaking score on Mississippi Valley State's defense, which on paper should be a lot easier than it has been for a lot of teams so far this year. Mississippi Valley State has been good as a double-digit dog, especially in this kind of point range. And Tulsa, if you've been betting them as a favorite, they've been burning your goddamn money. I think that this is a game where we saw the worst of Mississippi Valley State's offense a couple times out. But I just think that this is a game where they're going to take away a lot of transition opportunities. They're going to freaking really make you make the most out of your possessions in a limited possession game. And this game's going to stay under. That's the most sound way I can approach it. I think that looking at Mississippi Valley State, I looked at some of their team total lines, and I was like 57.5 really doesn't scream a ton of value unless you're taking the under. The only time that I can remember them scoring more than that was the game against Missouri, and I think the game against North Alabama, because they won that game. Outside of that, I haven't seen Mississippi Valley State eclipse 57.5 points. So I like the full game under. I like the first half under. I like Mississippi Valley State team total under. And I like them as a fucking 21.5 point underdog. So, obviously, they're not undefeatable at this point range. Mississippi State beat them by 30. Who else beat them really badly? I don't even know. I guess Yale beat them pretty badly also. Bottom line is, I do think that this is Mississippi Valley State team that can take advantage of a bad ATS Tulsa team. If you look at Tulsa, the only game that they won ATS was a game that they were a 7.5 point dog on the neutral court versus Loyola Chicago. That does not inspire confidence to lay this type of number. Now, they haven't been a big favorite like this before, but the 3 times that they have been against Detroit, Central Michigan, and Jacksonville State, all failures. I think that for Mississippi Valley State, the key for them is having a good first half, being able to keep Tulsa under 35 points, being able to score 30 points themselves, and frankly, being able to utilize your bench at a high enough rate that you're not going to freaking fall and run out of energy in the second half, which has been an issue for Mississippi Valley State because I don't know what it is. I think that it's just they lose that energy to try and get to the free throw line. So we'll see what happens. But from an ATS perspective, I just can't make a case for Tulsa, even though the line is moved 2.5 points in their favor. I just can't do it. So I'm going to ride with Mississippi Valley State and a whole bunch of unders in this game. That's about it. Okay. Listen, I want to take Youngstown first half. I think that will give us a really good measuring test. But if Southern plays a good first half, we can count on Youngstown being to elevate their game in the second. 12 points from first half to second half production. That's hard to fucking deny. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure on the first half, but I'm going to roll with Youngstown and I'm going to roll with them, especially at halftime, if this game is closer than I'm anticipating. All right. That's about it for me. I got to go and keep on working on this Saturday card. I'm already on a fucking bunch of plays. I got to see what I have some good CLV on. I got some Missouri. I got some Providence. I got some EIU. I got Alabama. I got East Carolina. I got Charlotte. I got Duquesne over. I got Florida Atlantic over. I got Virginia under. What else do I got? I got Florida State at plus 10.5. That shit's gone. Let's call some CLV. What else do I have? What else? I have Stephen F. Austin. What else? I have Davidson, the Loiter brothers going at each other, Fletcher versus Foster. And then, of course, Zach Edey, the 7'4" Torontonian. Yeah, I'm on San Jose State. I'm on fucking Richmond. I'm on UConn. UConn's gonna fuck with their eyes open tomorrow. Fuck Butler. Really want to get some team totals because I think that there's gonna be some value there. I like some NC State team total. Who else did I like? I liked Iowa's team total versus Southeast Missouri State's defense. Portland, they're gonna have a low total probably. So there's some value on the card. I still got to dig deeper into the added board. I sort of focused on the main board and just getting the best value on the lines that I could. And the lines came out on my offshore book at fucking 9:30 in the morning. So I've had lots of time to get some CLV, but CLV does not guarantee winning bets. Northwestern State and Rice is something that I'll be targeting definitely a total on. Samford and South Carolina State, I'd be worried about that because Q Glover is probably not back in the lineup for them. Yeah, it's a really difficult card tomorrow. It's a difficult card tomorrow. A lot of rivalry games, a lot of neutral court games, and a lot of games that you just really can't tell what the motivation is. St. Francis, New York versus Hartford, Winthrop versus LSU, Texas Southern versus North Carolina A&T. Texas Southern hasn't played in a while, or at least in a while versus a D1 opponent. So I have major troubles on Saturdays. I do not think that I've made money I think I made money on 2 Saturdays so far this season. So I'm not holding my breath for tomorrow. Longwood and Citadel, that's an interesting game. I'm looking at the over there. Stetson in Ohio. I'm afraid to get on Stetson because they look so good against Charleston, and then Ohio looks so bad against Florida. There's just no way that's going to fucking hold true. So, it's a big card. I have a lot of fucking games to go over, a lot of team totals, a lot of first halves. So, if I can fucking be 20 grand or less deep into this card, I think that I'll be comfortable. But if I go fucking more than that, I'm going to be crying all day. All right. Well, that is it for me. I wish you the best of luck with your bets. And if you bet against the Bonnies, go fuck yourself, fuck your mother, fuck your family, fuck your children. Okay? I hate you. Don't you fucking tell me that you bet against the St. Bonaventure Bonnies in fucking Bonnet Turf. All right. Sorry. Getting a little out of control there. Pat Chambers will fuck any woman that exists. There's no woman, skinny, big, that he will not have sex with. So put that in your fucking coffee pot and fucking brew that up. Later, player.